Texture is what defines the surface of something. For example, a banana has a really fine surface, a fine texture. An orange has a more rougher surface, therefore a rougher texture. In this Paper Texture Basics course, you will learn how to create two different kinds of textures on a canvas. A flat texture and a more rougher texture. In addition, we will demonstrate for you how to put a paper texture on a cardboard box. But before we begin, let's look at the tools you'll need. This is the paper that we are going to use for the paper texture. It's a fiber paper meant for use in the kitchen. We are going to talk more about this paper later. You will need two canvases, size about 40 x 40 and 30 x 40 centimeters. You will also need a plate of some sort, a brush, a bowl for the glue, and ordinary wallpaper glue. You can get wallpaper glue already mixed and ready for use, or you can get it in powder and mix it yourself. If you decide to mix your own glue, just follow the description of the product. We start by ripping the paper into pieces. Rip off the sides of the paper to avoid straight lines. These are the shapes that we are going to work with: triangles, bigger squares, and paper strips. When you're making paper strips, a ruler can be really helpful. We always mix our own wallpaper glue. For this project, we have mixed about 8 deciliters of glue. We are first covering the canvas with the biggest pieces and then breaking up the pattern with the other pieces on top. The process is to first put a layer of glue, then the paper, and then another layer of glue on top. So just think glue, paper, glue. Now put a thick layer of glue on the canvas. Start with the biggest pieces of paper. Put one end of the paper on the canvas. Don't let go of the other end. Use the brush and with gentle strokes, fasten the paper to the canvas. These gentle strokes will prevent air bubbles from occurring. Air bubbles in your texture may weaken your art piece. There are two main reasons why air bubbles occurs: not enough glue or not enough gentle strokes. A few small air bubbles are acceptable though, because they will not weaken your art piece. Put a layer of glue on top of the paper. When putting on a new paper, big or small, you must always overlap them. Remember, use gentle strokes and put a layer of glue on top. It is important to use a lot of glue, also on top of the paper, because fiber paper, like this, is meant for absorbing liquid its own weight several times over. This means that the paper will drink the glue until the paper is full. If we do not feed the paper with enough glue, the paper will not stick to the canvas. When you think you have put on too much glue, chances are that you have put on just about enough. Besides, the consequences of using too much glue is only more drying time. It's a non-expensive glue, so use a lot of glue. Remember to overlap and use gentle strokes to prevent air bubbles. When the paper is getting wet from the glue, it weakens. So by using these gentle strokes, you also prevent the paper from ripping apart. However, if you should rip the paper apart, it's easy to fix. Just put on more glue and put a small piece of paper on top. It's smart to do this right away. It's important to know that when the paper gets wet, it's expanding, and when it starts to dry, it shrinks back. So when the paper is wet, it's important to not stretch it with the brush. When the stretched wet paper is drying, this drying process is so powerful that it can bend and twist your canvas. So again, make sure that you don't stretch the paper. When you're putting on smaller pieces of paper, you can put them directly on the canvas, but remember, gentle strokes. Put a layer of small paper strips on all the edges to cover the canvas completely. Remember to overlap. As you might see, we now have a square pattern in the texture. We are going to break up this pattern by using the triangled shaped paper on top. This will give us a texture without any obvious pattern in it. Remember, glue, paper, glue. Rip the paper into pieces to break up the pattern even more. Texture like this might need from 12 hours to several days to dry. It's depending on the room temperature, type of paper, and the amount of glue that has been used. We are now going to create a more rougher texture. Put a thick layer of glue on the canvas, place the paper where you want it, and gently use the brush to fasten the paper. By pushing the paper with the brush, you now get a rougher texture. When we create rougher textures in our art pieces, we use a random combination of big and small pieces of paper. There are many types of paper on the market. Be experimental and try out different kinds of papers till you find which one you like. Both pieces are finished and are now an excellent basis for your artwork. You can now paint on it with any kind of technique that you like. When using the mini technique, we have to prime the paper textures before we can paint on them. We can now see the nerves in the texture, but we cannot see the edges of the paper. And that is exactly what we wanted to accomplish. If you haven't heard about the mini technique before, you can find video courses and more information about it on our website. Draw a strong line all around the box to mark the top of the box. Put a thick layer of glue on the box. Add the paper and push it together to create the texture. Make sure that the paper texture doesn't cross the pencil line, because if it does, the lid won't fit anymore. Remember to add a layer of glue on top. Continue this process on the entire box. The paper texture is finished and you can now paint on it with any kind of technique that you like. We have painted our box with the mini technique. If you haven't heard about the mini technique before, you can find more information about it on our website. If you want to learn how to paint on interior with the mini technique, we have a video course called The Mini Technique on Interior. It's always a good idea to check your paper texture for air bubbles. You do this while the paper texture is still wet. A quick and easy way to do it is to wet your hands on a sponge and gently feel if there's any air bubbles. If there are air bubbles, you'll feel them moving. It's important that your hands are wet when you do this, because if they're not, the paper texture may stick to your hands. If you find air bubbles, locate them and fix them. This is how you do it. Use a scissor and puncture the air bubble like this. Fold the paper a little bit back to the sides. Add some glue and gently fold the paper back. Squeeze the air bubble out with your finger. Add a layer of glue and then add a new piece of paper where you have made the punctured hole. Put a layer of glue on top.